Kelly from Cully Kid, and today we're going to learn how to make grilled cheese, and we're going to learn about stove safety. So before we get started, we always make sure we have our ingredients and supplies ready. So for our ingredients, we're going to make a really simple grilled cheese. So we just need 2 slices of bread, some slices of cheese. I'm using American cheese, but you can choose whichever one you like. And I'm using actually mayo for the outside of my bread, but you could also use butter. That will keep it from not sticking in the pan and get it nice and grilled and toasty. So for our supplies, we'll need our skillet, spatula, and something to spread our mayo or butter. So I have a butter knife here. Since we want to be careful with the stove, I also do have a pot holder so we can be ready to learn about our stove safety. So now let's get started. So we always, before we start cooking, we always make sure we have our hands washed. So I've already done that, so I'm ready to get started. But if you haven't yet, you can go ahead and do that now. And before we launch into making our recipe, we're going to talk about the stove first. So when we turn on the stove, we want to be really careful about a few things. So one is that our handle to our pan is always turned inwards. And that is because if it's out and you walk by, you might forget and you might hit it and have knock off a hot pan or have an injury. So we want to make sure that we turn our handles in so that way it's nice and safe if somebody is walking by. We also want to make sure that we are being aware of what is going on in the stove. So right now all of my burners are off, but we're going to always treat the stove like it might be hot. So maybe somebody just used that burner and just turned it off. So I don't ever want to act like this is cold without knowing it. I don't want to put my hand on it. I don't want to put something that's not heat proof on it. So always think about what is hot on the stove. So when we turn our stove burner on, this is going to get our metal pan really hot. It's also going to get our surface hot. It's going to get our grill top hot. So that's why we want to be nice and careful. And we do have this pot holder here just in case your handle gets too hot. If we're keeping our handle over the counter and not over the stove or too close to the flame, it should be okay. But sometimes you will have a really hotter flame or you'll have smaller handles. So you want to have a pot holder nearby just so anytime you need to hold or grab a pan that you can use that and be sure that you're not going to burn your hands. So now that we've talked about a couple of those things, we'll get started with making our grilled cheese and then we'll put some of our tips into practice. So the first thing I'm going to do is, since it's a fairly simple recipe, I'm actually going to turn my burner on. So I'm finding the burner on my stove. This is indicating that this is the left-right burner, which is the one that I'm using, and I'm going to turn it on. And so for most recipes, it's pretty standard that if you don't know, you're going to be at a medium heat. So right now I'm in exactly medium. If you were told in a recipe to put it on high heat, you turn that flame up, low heat, turn it down. For this, we're going to be nice in the middle. So that's going to heat up because we're just going to do a couple of steps before we put something in the pan. So let's grab our bread and our cheese and our mayo. So mayo is made out of eggs and oil. So that's why this works on the outside. I'm just going to put a very thin layer. I don't want it to taste like mayo. I just want to use this for its oil factor and its non-stickness, if you will. So I'm getting all the way to the edges so that way I don't have any dry bread. So this is like different than if you were toasting bread where you have dry toast. We all know our grilled cheese is a little bit moister, and that's how that happens. So I like the mayo because it's nice and easy to spread, but you could also be using eggs here. Now, normally when this is ready, I would just put this down in the pan. In case this is your first time using a stove, you want to be careful and you might feel hesitant about putting your fingers too close to the pan because remember, this is already hot. You don't want to come too close to that if you're not sure how it's going to go. So I'm going to just turn this over and I'm going to use my spatula to put it in the stove. Okay, and we hear that nice sizzle, which means that the stove was hot enough for our grilled cheese. And I'm going to take 2 slices of cheese and put it on top. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to put the mayo on the one side of my other piece of bread. Okay, and that is done. So I'm going to move my bread over to the side and do the same thing with this one. I have it on my spatula, put it into the stove, and then I'm going to top it with 2 pieces of cheese. Okay, so again, my hands were coming kind of close, so you want to be careful if you're adding anything into the pan like that. You're being very, very careful. You know where your hands are going, you're in control. And if you're not, and if you're nervous about getting too close, you could use a fork or you could use some tongs to put them in. You could put your cheese on your bread beforehand and then put it in, so that way your hands aren't coming too close. So we're gonna let that toast for a little while, and I'm just gonna clean up, and then we'll come back and put our grilled cheese together. Okay, so I'm gonna start by taking the first one that I put in and putting it on top of my other piece of bread. So I'm grabbing the handle, though if it's hot or you're worried about it being hot, you can use your pot holder. And I'm gonna get underneath here. Oops. Okay. And then we have to do this motion quickly, otherwise, you know, things might fall off or whatever. So when we use our spatula, we're just going to do a very quick flick of the wrist and put it where we want. And I missed a little bit, so I'm pushing it back on. It's okay. I'm using my hands a little bit. That's okay too, because they're nice and clean. It's not too hot. So you press it down, and you can see that it got pretty brown here, not as brown here because that was on the edge, but we're not melted. So what we're gonna actually do is turn this slightly down so we don't over brown it. Push this in the center. And a nice way that we can finish melting our cheese is we're going to put a lid on this. So I'm gonna grab a lid and finish melting. Okay, so I have my lid that fits my skillet. I'm gonna put this on top and watch through the top since it's clear to see when my cheese is nice and melty. Okay, you'll see that my handle is still turned in. Now we're using a lid, and so this is all metal on the outside, this is metal top, so this for sure we want to use our pot holder for when we take it off. So we're going to grab our pot holder, put it to the side, get underneath our grilled cheese, and give it a flip. Oh, that's a little bit dark, but that's okay. Oh, nice and melty. We don't even need to keep doing this with the lid because I just saw, look at this delicious melty piece of cheese here. So we take it, put it onto our plates, and we're just about done. But stove safety, we need to make sure we turn off our burner. So our burner is off, and now I'm going to move my pan off of the heat. Because even though the burner is off, this is still hot. So this is going to give it a chance to cool down even more. And we can let that sit until it cools down before we start washing it. So pretty easy. We just made a grilled cheese. We learned some stove safety tips that you can take with you when you make your other creations on the stove. And so with our grilled cheese too, we didn't talk about, you can do a lot of different variations. So I did just American cheese. But you can add bacon in the middle, you could add tomatoes, you could add all different types of filling, all different types of cheese. This is just to get you started off. So you're all set to make your own grilled cheese. Enjoy.